let's take a look at simulating coin tossing in Excel. So we're going to simulate tossing a coin 20 times in Excel, and then we're going to record the number of heads and the number of tails. So let's just pop straight over to Excel in order to do this. I've just put in some really basic information. So I said, okay, this is a simulated coin toss, and I'm making the note for myself that 1 is going to be heads, 0 is going to be tails. This is a little bit easier than trying to do something where we actually use the words heads and tails or the letters H and T. So numbers are always going to be easier to randomize. The other thing I did is I said, okay, toss number. Well, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and I could keep going till 20. Now, the other thing I could do is I could use the fact that Excel is pretty darn smart. So if I just highlight and then from this bottom right here, click on it and hold down and scroll, notice that next to my little arrow, there's the number 7. If I go down another number 8, number 9. So this is going to increase. You can basically just scroll down until you see the number 20 showing up. And so bam, that should fill everything in. It recognizes your pattern. So that's pretty cool. The next thing I'm going to do is take a look at the outcome. And I put outcome and fixed outcome. I'll show you why in a second. So there are two functions that we could really use here. One is going to be easier than the other, but I'll show you both. So the first one is rand. So the rand function. So remember, if we're putting in some kind of formula here, some function, we need to do equals. The first function I mentioned was rand. You open it and close it right away. So open parentheses, close parentheses. And if we hit enter, we get a decimal. So we always get something between 0 and 1. And I could do the same thing. I could pull this, not pull the whole cell, grab the bottom right here and pull this down. I could, scroll like that. There is one notable issue though. So it did take the formula, right? Each of these just says rand. So that's fine. But hey, wait a minute. My initial number changed. I thought it was like 0.6 something, and now it's 0.92. And in fact, if I hit enter, or sorry, if I try to scroll this thing even farther, now all of them changed again. So that's why I had outcome and fixed outcome. So I could use this, right? And I could say like, well, if my number is less than 0.5, maybe it's heads. If it's greater than 0.5, maybe it's tails, something like that. But that sounds a little complicated. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use a different function. So instead, let me just, delete all that stuff and delete. And then I'm going to use the function randbetween. Now what this does, if I do my first parenthesis here, it's going to say bottom and top. Those are the two entries I need to put. So this is going to give me a random integer between, and I'm going to say 0, comma 1. So I just wanted to spit out something either a 0 or a 1. And this gives me 0, 0, 0. That's kind of bizarre. I can, let's see, move the decimal. I don't really need that. I don't know why it was going to that many decimal places. Probably because I was working with the random function before. If I go to a different cell, let's see, if I do rand between and I do 0, comma 1, let's see. Yeah, it doesn't give me anything silly. It just gives me 0 without the decimals. Not that that's really a problem. Okay, but notice again, rand between keeps changing, so that's definitely an issue, but we'll solve that issue in a minute. The good thing that we have solved is now if we drag this thing, we see we get just 0s and 1s. That's what we wanted. All right, but once you have a formula like this, so I have rand between 0 and 1, and I am not referencing any other cells. I'm not referencing the toss or anything else. If I want this to go down, and I've already created my number of tosses here, I can just double click on that bottom right. Instead of dragging it, it will fill all the way down and it's going to stop. Excel's pretty smart. It's going to stop wherever my my column to the left of it had stopped. So we see a bunch of 0s and 1s. Again, if I click somewhere else and let's just say hello, all right? Even just doing that, just saying hi, that changed all my values. So I'm going to even just erasing it changed all the values. So that's why I have outcome and fixed outcome. So I'm going to take all these values. I'm going to copy them. So Control C for me, and I'm going to put them in the fixed outcome here. But I'm going to paste. I've got a few different paste options. I'm going to do just the values. So I'm pasting just the values there. And notice even doing that, now the list looks different from what we had over here, because anytime I do anything at all, the rand function will repopulate itself. Now, of course, what you could have done is just copy this and place it over itself. So you could, if you wanted to, paste just the values over itself. But that's fine if you want to go that route. I just kind of created a new one because I sort of like reminding myself, hey, these are going to change no matter what I do. So again, I'm going to say hi, and these guys, oh, well, actually I had pasted over them, right? So we don't see that formula anymore. So, okay, so let's say we have our outcomes here, and I'm actually going to change this back just so we kind of see. Also, this is not randbetween, randbetween. Okay. So I'm going to do this and change this just so we can kind of see the nature of, long string of zeros. So we can kind of see the nature of the fixed outcomes and the non-fixed. Just so, again, I like to have that reminder. But if you want, you can always, bold the fixed outcomes or something like that. Or again, just copy over. Okay, so then here I've got number of heads. Here I've got number of tails. Well, this is kind of ugly. So there's a couple things you could do. You could highlight these two columns and you could expand them. As long as you highlight both of them, if you expand one, it'll expand both. So you could do that. But if you wanted to keep things more compact and you just wanted to be able to see everything that was here, you can highlight those two cells and you can go up to the alignment stuff here. So some of this is just, aligning left, center, or right. If you want to merge the cells, you can. But this one up here in the upper right where it says wrap the text, if I click on that, it's just going to actually wrap it around, expand the cell vertically so that this fits in. Okay, now if I want to know the number of heads, remember where I said a 1 represents heads, and we're looking at these fixed outcomes. So we're using this column here. So I want to count how many ones are in that table. Okay, well, it wouldn't be that hard to just go through the table and count them, but I'm going to let Excel do the work for me. So I'm going to say equals count, and there are a couple different count functions we see, but I'm going to do count if, because this is going to say count the number of cells within a range that meets a condition. So I'm going to say count if, and then first parenthesis, and it's going to tell me, well, what's the range you're interested in? I'm interested in all of these numbers. Okay, comma, and then it's going to say, what's your criteria? Well, I'm just going to say 1. All right, so I'm counting all the ones for heads, and it says, hey, you've got 13 of those. Well, I guess if I did 20 tosses, I should probably have 7 tails. So there's a couple ways to do this. I could just say, well, I had 20 tosses. I'm going to subtract this number. That would be fine. I would get 7. But we could also just practice with that countif function again. So I'm going to do countif. Again, it's going to ask me for the range, so I'll copy that range again. And then comma, so what's my criteria? Well, now I'm looking for zeros. And the number of tails is 7, right, as we expected. 13 heads means the remaining 7 have to be tails. Of course, if we wanted to change the number of tosses, we could do that. If we wanted to find some other way for these outcomes, we could do that. The other thing we could do, I just want to kind of show this on a blank sheet here, and the other thing we could do here is have other outcomes. So if we're tossing, having a hard time typing today. Okay, randbetween. So if let's say we're doing something like we're rolling a 6-sided die, right? So I could say between 1 and 6, maybe, right? So I could do something like this, and of course we know anytime I hit enter on that, it's going to change. So if we wanted to roll a bunch of dice, we could do that. The other thing we could do is we don't have to just go vertically. So if we wanted to have a big old selection of these, we could have a table. In this case, I've got a 5 by 6 table, so 30 outcomes. And if I just kind of click around, they all say the same thing: rand between 1 and 6. So there are a few different ways to kind of toy around with this function. And again, you could do the countif. And I'm just showing this because, I don't know, we might need to be tossing some dice, of course. So let's say I want to count if, so I'm going to look at, here's my whole range, so I can select, I don't need to just select a column or a row, I can do a big collection. And let's say I want to count the number of, I don't know, threes that I happen to roll. Okay, well, there are supposedly no threes, but if I hit enter again, there are 7 of them. So again, these are going to change. So one thing you could do is you could also copy these again and paste them as values just on top of themselves. So now, like we said before, we don't have to have a separate place for the numbers we generated. We just want to make sure they're fixed. And now we see that randbetween function is gone. And so now when we count this, right, we know that this number is not going to change because these numbers for our tosses aren't changing. Okay, cool. That's at least a good sense of what happens with the rand and randbetween functions, the countif function, and being able to count the number of something. The other thing we could do, of course, with the number of heads, we could take the percentage. We could always say, oh, 13 out of 20. So we could do a simple thing like that equals, number of heads divided by 20 for the tosses. So if we wanted to get the decimal or percentage, we could do that as well. So a lot of options there, but this is a good start.